He came home from the lake with 5 brown trout. I was kind of furious. We could only eat 1 of those. And I've got no freezer. What the hell am I going to do with them? Right, what did people do before? Fridges and freezers. Yeah. They'd salt it or they'd smoke it.
And that was the moment that set Sally Barnes on a path to becoming one of Ireland's most celebrated food producers, renowned for her amazing smoked wild fish. Sally's life story and her passion for nature are incredible, and she shares both of them with me on this episode of Food Matters. Hi, I'm Mick Kelly. I'm the founder of GIY, and Food Matters is the podcast series where I meet the people who are reconnecting us with real, healthy, sustainable food. They tell us why food matters to them and why it should matter to you too. Sally Barnes is both a force of nature and a champion for it. Affectionately known as Ireland's wild salmon warrior, Sally runs the last smokehouse in this country that preserves only wild Atlantic salmon. In this conversation, we talk about Sally's vast experience in this traditional industry, her concern about our dwindling stocks of wild salmon, her dismay about farm salmon, and how she's inspiring a new generation of food students. Here's a little taste of what's to come.
And within 18 months of putting freshwater mussels into the river, salmon were back. Mother Nature doesn't need an awful lot from us. She just needs us to butt out.
Get out of the way.
Yeah, just stand back and let her deal with it.
You're at the coalface of that because you're working with the wild equivalent of that, the properly wild only.
I'm working with the salmon.
With the salmon.
The Salmo salar. Yeah. I have asked if we could please change the nomenclature of the thing in a cage, which doesn't fulfill any of the criteria that magnificent creature. I apologised to them now. I said, we didn't know what the hell was going on. All these terrible things that have been done to the planet were done on the watch of people my generation. And I'm deeply sorry.
I don't think you'll have heard many interviews quite like the one you're about to hear with Sally Barnes. She is such a unique and passionate character. I think like the very definition of an artisan food producer and a true champion of the natural world. Originally from Scotland, but raised in Sussex in the UK, Sally was really inexperienced when it came to cooking and processing fish. But in 1975, she moved to a fishing village in West Cork to live with her husband, who was a fisherman. And the rest, as they say, is history.
When I came here first, and here you are living in a fishing household, and there's unbelievably beautiful fish coming in and going, oh, Christ, I don't know how to cook it. Oh, God. Yeah. So I started acquiring cookery books. And then, they're all full of fabulous recipes. Oh, yeah. I don't have brandy. I don't have cream. I can't afford 2 eggs in that recipe. And then I sat back and I thought, oh, God, I'm not going to make a handle of fish. And then Colin said to me, he said, oh, it's easy. He said, just, a bit of tin foil, cleaning up the fish, put a bit of butter in it, salt and pepper, wrap it up, throw it in the oven. I thought, well, that sounds too easy. That's exactly what it was. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And you didn't want all the alternative extras. The alternative extras were to mask the fact that it might not be terribly fresh. Yeah, exactly. So the only fish that didn't really work with was mackerel, because when I came, first time I came, and he'd managed to make enough money salmon fishing to buy an 18-foot open punt. So we'd go out in the evenings to the outboard and feather for mackerel. So, great fun. Mackerel for tea. Yum. Still a couple of mackerel for breakfast. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's still a couple of mackerel there. So I had to delve into how the hell do you make mackerel taste not like mackerel so much? Yeah. When you're eating so much of it. So 3 weeks and that was it. I said, do you know what? I'm never going to eat another mackerel in my life. I've done it. Oof. Anything that you eat too often, maybe not potatoes.
Maybe not potatoes. Everything else, though, I agree.
Yeah.
But was it a frugality thing that you were trying to make sure you didn't waste any of that mackerel, or what?
That, and we didn't have money. We were living on fresh air a lot of the time.
Even before we get to the skills, though, and smoking and stuff, like, you were saying he'd give you a fish and he'd say it's easy, just gut it or whatever. But like exactly that part of it is what freaks people out a bit about fish sometimes. Like, how do you gut it? How do you fill it? Like,
well, I had lived on the Clyde estuary as a child in Scotland, so we knew about fish. My father wouldn't eat fish because he was afraid of the bones.
Yeah.
If he was away, and he used to work away Monday to Friday, travelling salesman, so he wasn't at home much. So it was quite, weird that I end up leading the kind of life that my mum led. She brought 4 of us up on her own. A lot of the time.
But how did you get, moving from that side of it, knowing how to fillet a fish or gut a fish or whatever and cook it, and then into smoking?
Back to the mackerel. We were having a discussion. Well, we had a big argument actually, and then we had a discussion. If Colin wasn't out at sea fishing, his greatest passion in life was to go off with his rod to lakes. Now, in the 1970s, lakes held incredible brown trout.
Yeah.
There was sea trout in the rivers. There was... So he'd go fishing. And we didn't have a freezer. And I'd had second child. So I've got one person with no teeth and one 3.5-year-old. So he came home from the lake with 5 brown trout, not one of which weighed less than 3.5 pounds.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you wouldn't see those in a fit anymore. And I was kind of furious. Why did you bring so many? We could only eat 1 of those. And I've got no freezer. What the hell am I going to do with them? I was cross. I hate waste. So, and I always have done. So, instead of having a really massive barney, right, what did people do before? How did people manage before? Fridges and freezers, and they salted it. Well, we'd been doing salted mackerel for bait for pots, fish, crab pots or lobster pots. And you have to put bait away when you can get it. So we would salt that down and never eat it. Because it was mackerel. You could soak it and make it edible again, but nah.
Too much work.
Too much work, and it still tasted of mackerel. Sorry, mackerel.
Getting it.
Are you getting the gist?
Trend here about mackerel.
So, the long conversation was, how do people manage without ice and freezers and all that? They'd salt it or they'd smoke it. And a part of the rationale for the smoking was maybe to mask some of the salt. That you would bring the try and match up your salt and your smoke and have a sort of, but not hide the nature of the raw material. So we started experimenting. I said, right, we're going to practice. We're going to try smoking. So mackerel freely abundant. And we drank loads of tea then, still do. It's favourite beverage. We were drinking so much of it, I bought a whole tea chest full of tea. From Fuller's shop in Union Hall, because they did their own tea. They bought the chest and they filled the packets. And I said, would you sell me a chest of tea? Could you get me? No problem. So that kept us going for the best part of a year, which was great. And then we had this very handy plywood box. So that became my first smoking box. We drilled a hole in the bottom, put in a camping cooking aluminium pan, drilled holes in the bottom of that, stood the tea chest up on blocks. This is not patented, actually. I'm not going to say anymore.
More's the pity.
More's the pity. Stood it up on that, put shavings in the pan, and then got metal rod speets and pushed them through the
sides,
through the eyes, and hung them over the top of the box. Bit of wet sacking. That used to be the be-all and end-all in the fishing boats as well.
What's the
wet
sacking for?
Bit of wet sacking. Keep things cool. Before there was ice, that's what people did out at sea. You would have a piece of old jute sack, soak it in the sea and put it over your fish. And if there was wind blowing, that would help. But on a hot summer's day, it was far from adequate. Far from adequate. But hey, you do what you do. Or a whole bit of carpet.
Can you explain for the uninitiated, me included, is smoking just about flavour, or is there preservation as well?
Yeah, it's preservation. That's what we were trying to do with the mackerel. I hadn't salted it because we were just experimenting. So I didn't know about the salting. I knew that we got kippers from Scotland that were just the pits. They were rubbery, bright yellow, horrible, and salty. So I thought, right, well, obviously you need to put salt in it. And then after there's just loads of experimenting. I got information leaflets from the Torrey Research Facility in Aberdeen. That was the fisheries end of DEFRA in the UK in the day. And they were amazing. But their handbooks, they'd done loads of work, published all these handbooks in the 50s and 60s, pre-freezers, fridges, cold chain,
almost like
chilled distribution.
Dig for Victory pamphlets.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. So their recommendation for salting salmon, now I'd done a salmon because another bit of long story, but I'll leave it out. After the tea chest, Colin fished for salmon in 1975. No, 79, last year that he fished for them. Best salmon fishing ever. In one day, he got 249 salmon, all around and over 3 kilos in weight. Absolutely amazing.
Where would you have been catching them?
In just back of Galley Head in West Cork. That's the kind of landings. That was the last year before the impact of Ireland joining the EU and giving away 95% of the fish in exchange for all the agricultural inputs and infrastructure inputs.
Okay.
European Union was thrilled to take 95% of the fish in a country which, as an island, had a wealth of fish around the coast because it didn't have a fleet.
Just to put that figure in context, like you said he caught 200 and something fish in one day.
Yeah.
How many fish would you be taking in a year now, wild salmon?
Last year, 199.
Wow.
For the season, and that was dreadful. And this year, it's going to be even worse. Last year, their quota was 1,036 between the 14 license holders on that one river. It'll be 730 between them this year.
Wow, okay. We'll definitely come back to all of that because we're going to get into that for sure.
Thank you.
But if we go back to the
why did I? Yeah. So Torrey Research Facility. These handbooks were hilarious because, as I said, they'd been written when you used to see sides of salmon hanging in bars alongside the salami.
Yeah.
No packaging. Yeah. Cured. So their recommendation for dry salting the salmon. There's 2 methods. You use a wet brine. I don't know why they call it a wet brine. It's wet. It's water and salt. It's the brine. Or dry salting. Dry salting is a lot slower, but it's more impactful. It draws out a lot more water.
Yeah.
It's the first part of the preservation process because
you're packing the fish with salt.
Yeah, you're layering them.
Yeah.
It took me 40 minutes to get my first salmon fillet off. Cleaning was easy, filleting's not. Cleaning's easy. One zip up the belly and whip it out. But filleting, I thought, oh God, I'm never going to make a hand of this. It's taken me 40 minutes. It's going to take me another 40 minutes to get the other side off. Torrey recommended leave your side of salmon in dry salt for 24 hours. Now, salt's pulling water out. As the water's leaving the flesh, it's getting more and more and more rigid. If you left a side of salmon, unless it was huge, I mean, if it was aside from a fish of about, 24, 26, 28 pounds, that's a huge wild salmon. That would be about appropriate. You could play cricket with it. Okay. I mean, it would be that rigid and inedible. So I thought, right, well, that was 1965, that paper was written. Now we're at 1981. We've got vacuum packers, we've got chilled distribution, we've got ice packs, all these things that were unheard of 20 years before. So I thought that was just be far too salty because I'd been dibbling. The salt removes free water from the flesh. All bacteria need water, light, and food. A bit like us, I suppose. Everything has to live. So if they don't like super salt, super saline, super sugary, they don't like vinegar, and they can't survive in a desiccated situation. They need, food, light, water. So what I'm doing with the preserving, the smoking, is draw out as much free water that's not an intrinsic part of the cell that leaves your cell structure, but, has taken any water that's not actually required to keep the structure of the cell. When you fillet it, obviously, you're splitting loads of cells, so you've got free water milling there. Then the next phase, so the bacteria don't like the salt. The next phase is the smoking itself, and that's removing free water from the surface. You've got your material salted, the salt through it.
Yes.
Through the whole depth of it, width of it, whatever. Then you're drying by smoke flowing and moving over the top. There's a fan on my machines, just draws smoke through. The third aspect of it is the smoke itself. Wood esters have got antimicrobial properties as well. Yeah. So you're using those three aspects to create a much more stable product. Fish is one of the most highly perishable. Milk and fish, perishable. Dreadful. If you're trying to make something of it. So, yeah. So self-taught.
So you're self-taught, and so how much was that about just preserving for yourselves to eat, and then when did it become a business?
There's an aspect to that, and then as I started experimenting with different fish, I'd ask friends
to have a taste.
And please don't say it's lovely. Please, I want a critique. I don't want, it's lovely. And that was going grand until I had no idea about business. I had to go off and do business training courses. And this country was great for that. I did an ANCO course that was in Cork City, and that was across 5 months. And that was amazing. But the training that they still do it now, you have to grow your business. And I'm thinking, I can't really do that. I'm working with wild fish. Yeah. It's finite. And I knew from living the life of a fisherman's wife that fish populations fluctuate year on year. There's nothing consistent or steady.
So that's interesting, because that was long before there was the shortage that there is now. Yeah. But you knew that was an issue even at the very beginning.
Yeah, because I thought, well, I don't want Duns or big stores like that coming banging on the door. I mean, from a perspective, maybe that would have been flattering. Oh, look, they want 300 sides of salmon. How fab! But then I'm going, oh shoot, if I can't get the fish, then I look a complete wally. You're advertising something, but you can't come up with the goods. So instead of irritating buyers, I thought, right, well, obviously those big stores are out for me. Yeah. I'll work with independent retailers in this country. Yeah. Sheridan's was some of the first, the gorgeous Sheridan boys and Fiona. And
Ardkeen, you mentioned. You were working with them here in
Peter and Mary up in Country Choice. Yeah. Yeah, just, real people who got it, knew their customers.
Do you remember your first sale of a side of salmon, like commercially?
That took a while because I live in a very multicultural society, which is great. West Cork really did develop a lot faster with incomings. There were a lot of French, Germans, a lot of UK people. And you'd meet people that if you lived over there, you would never meet them. Yeah. But because it was a small inflow community, foreigners would be a lot more conspicuous. Yeah. I thought I was coming here and disappearing into the hills, and I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was going back to Scotland. It felt like it. Yeah. Back to community and people that cared. And I foolishly wanted to go to college in London to get a bit of city life, Yeah. Excitement. The downside of it is the air's filthy, Anyway, glad to come back. No, I had some really interesting German customers who were very happy to come and buy the fish. I had thought initially that it would be really good for anglers who were coming to Ireland. If they caught a salmon and they wanted to take it home, it wouldn't be possible to take a fresh fish home. Yeah. But if I smoked it for them, then they could take home 2 sides. So that's really where I thought, oh, this is how I'll go. And then some of the German visitors would say, we cannot buy the salmon, can you get the fish for us and we'll pay you for the fish? And I was thinking, wait a minute, no, that's not quite how it works, Barnes. They have to pay you for the smoking. It's one thing for them to buy the salmon and pay you for buying the salmon.
Yeah.
And I'm still not very good at that, you know.
Yeah.
I'll double the price of it and I'm still not very good at that. But that's okay. That's okay.
Can you, again, for the uninitiated, like I think all of us are kind of aware of this heroic journey that salmon go on to get up river and so on. But from a fishing perspective for wild salmon, where are you catching them? Is it always?
No, it's only in the rivers. I mean,
it's only in the rivers.
When I started, it was all sea fishing. There was a river fishery as well, but it was all drift netting at sea.
Yeah,
all inshore boats. They had to fish within 6 miles of the shore. They weren't allowed beyond that. You wouldn't go beyond that in a small punt anyway.
Yeah.
You know, 36 foot was the maximum length of vessel that was allowed to fish for wild salmon in the season. And then the seasons just got more and more protracted, and then they introduced quotas and tags. Once all the tags in that area had been used up, that was the end of that year's fishery.
So when you were saying about your husband catching the 200 odd fish, that would have been in open water in the sea as opposed to in a river.
Oh yeah, all sea fish.
Yeah.
And they were really clean. I knew the problem for the salmon were the rivers, which were starting to be corrupted. I mean, I remember the days when the back of the Examiner, or the Cork Examiner, would be photographs of fish kills in rivers.
Yeah.
And just shocking salmon and trout and you name it, floating belly up. And then after a while, that all stopped, and I thought, wow, that's fantastic. That means somebody's paying attention, and we're not getting the runoff from the land. And I asked friends who were with the fisheries, inland fisheries, because inland fisheries are in charge of salmon, not sea fisheries. So different grouping. And because Colin had been running angling boats here as well, the inland fisheries used to send their fantastic people out to see, can we see the logs of, did you catch any common skate? Did you catch any unusual things? What about shark? All that. So Kevin Linnane, God be good to him, an amazing man. He was with the inland fisheries for years. He made films, and his passion was salmon. It's infectious, salmon passion. And Kevin made some amazing films. He'd come down and stay with us, and he was just, he educated me so much on salmon. He'd spent a lot of time in Iceland where they were ranching wild salmon, because I thought they also had a lot of fish there. But he said, no, there were problems with their fish as well. So they would take, it was all farmers that owned the fisheries. They would take in returning adult fish, strip the eggs and milk from the best looking fish. You're not going to take the scraggy little ones. You take the biggest, healthiest looking ones, strip out the eggs and milk, take that to a hatchery, let them develop, and then when they've hatched from the egg, let them go back into the river, and you're just boosting your numbers of potential recruits. There was a wonderful friend down in West Cork, Mark Boyden. He has an educational system called Streamscapes, and he goes into schools. It's just amazing. Yeah. He worked ranching salmon for some years in the late 70s, early 80s, and then he stopped. And I said, why did you stop that? Because the returning fish are wild fish. You're using wild fish for the eggs and milk, and then letting them go into the river, letting them go off to sea and feed themselves. And we know they come home, they're humming. Yeah. So they're wild fish that have come back, and they're not being fed in cages. They're proper wild salmon. He said, we're taking too much control of nature. He said, we're selecting what to us look like the best.
Yeah.
But actually, with the way that climate's changing and ocean currents are changing, we need to have the aberrant ones. You're looking for the fish that doesn't conform. It might come back a lot earlier. It might come back a lot later. But
might be more resilient.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because
the genetics are evolving slightly to make that fish different.
Yeah.
So you want vive la différence, Good old French. Trust them to get it right. Maybe. So he stopped doing it. And then he became much more impassioned about cleaning the rivers, keeping the waterways clean. So he's now done water. Oh, you'd love him. He's brilliant. He's done, and I'll get it in a minute, water catchments for something like 24 rivers in Ireland now. And he talks to everybody in that catchment. Hill farmers, dairy farmers, people who don't farm, everybody that lives in that catchment, and just talks to them about how vitally important it is to keep that body of water clean and not allow the slurry in and not allow the runoff in and stop the cattle from getting in because they muddy the water. And then if you've got salmon eggs in the riverbed and somebody's muddied the water, that'll smother the eggs. You know, we just need to be sharing this planet, not trying to control it.
Yeah, and more kind of cognizant of our role in that ecosystem.
In any ecosystem, Michael, we seem to have lost the run of ourselves completely.
The diminishing stock that you're talking about, what's causing that? Why are the numbers dropping so much?
There's a wonderful old fisherman down there, Don Maurice, who said to me once, there are 39 reasons. And I was, really? He said, yeah. He said, I've seen when they're netting for bait for pots in the rivers. I didn't know they did this. He said, and then the mesh is so small. He said, what they're putting in pots as bait are juvenile salmon. I said, you're joking? He said, no. He said, when they take the gravel out of the bed of the river for roadworks or plastering up people's houses, used to be, great, we'll go down to the river and we'll take that out. That's the terminal moraine that was left over from the last ice age. Each individual piece is about the same size as a salmon egg. And it's not being replaced. Well, it wasn't being replaced. Right. There's some fantastic young people in this country take buckets of gravel that size back upstream to areas where salmon would previously have been spawning. But when they banned the drift netting at sea, I was thinking, shite, that means that all the fish that the commercial men were taking and making their livings out of, those fish are going to try and get into the rivers now. The rivers are a bit corrupt, let's face it. The reds where they would be spawning have been raped. The gravel's been taken away. Where the hell are they going to lay their eggs? They can't just stick it on the bottom. It has to be gravel that size. And the female flicks the gravel up, streams her eggs in. Mr. Milty comes along, does his thing, and then she flicks her tail and buries the eggs under the gravel again. Job done. The rivers in this country are very short compared to many other countries. So a lot of the salmon here, if the rivers are not very, very, very low when the fish come up, i.e. they haven't completely worn themselves out trying to get to where they came from, precisely that bit of riverbed. It can't be up another tributary. It's that very precise spot. If there's plenty of water coming up, they spawn away and then they'll get swept back down and go back out to sea again and do it all again, feed again, which they don't do elsewhere. Mark told me that. I think that's amazing. I love that. Anyway, ours don't die. That's what I'm trying to say. We don't get dead salmon.
So we've got a pollution problem in the rivers. We've taken away their spawning
area.
We're changing the shapes of rivers. We're
draining and we're making water move differently.
Yeah. Does that have an impact?
No, I don't think so. Not as much as the pollution. The salmon can smell particles of the fresh water that they came from 1 or 2 years before, when they left, when they were sort of 4-inch, 5-inch long smolts. They would hang around in the mouth of the estuary before they go into the sea, because I think, Kevin said to me, I think it takes something like 10 days for them to acclimatise from being freshwater to being seawater fish. Yeah. And it is quite an extraordinary.
That's incredible.
And then to change back again. We studied osmosis as kids at school. So it's one thing when they're in the ocean, because that's strong salty solution. Yeah, that's no semi-permeable membrane there. But when they come back into freshwater, they're a sea fish. And I couldn't get my head around that until I read that they drink seawater at sea, and there's nil by mouth when they get into the freshwater. I just had pictures of them going pop, you know, and super inflating when they go into the fresh water. Sorry, I do anything to amuse myself.
That's amazing.
That's too much time on my own, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's other problems. Climate change, because of melting ice caps, is altering where the bodies of cold water that come down from Antarctica. The oceans are a massive circulatory system. If there's an El Nino off South America, that'll have an impact somewhere down the line in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't happen in isolation. The water's mingling.
Yeah. Water's heating up as well.
Oh, yeah. But the gyro systems like the North Atlantic Drift is shifting warm water from the Caribbean up towards Antarctica, because when that cold Antarctic water comes melting, it's heavy, so it sinks to the seabed. But nature hates vacuum, so it pulls hot water with it. So we've got this circulatory system in the North Atlantic Gyre. I'm so boring. I did oceanography with the Open University. Sorry, I got bored when the children went to secondary school. I can't emphasize how vital it is to keep your brain.
Yeah, keep learning.
Oh, keep learning.
All the time.
Met a group of Russian fisherfolk from Kamchatka at a slow fish event. Sat down at a table one night. There was one spare seat on this table. And slow food, slow fish, that's my tribe. It doesn't matter if we don't have a language.
Just explain what that means for people who've never heard of slow fish.
Right. In 1986, an Italian journalist, Carlo Petrini, very typical Italian, you know, shops in Italy still close at midday, a lot of them, for lunch and don't open till 4, but then they might be open till 9 or 10 at night.
Yeah.
It's the warmest part of the day for a start, so you're not cooking, trying to do your business. It also allows time for the whole family to get together and eat together. That's really important.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't TV dinner family, you know, it was proper dinner and sit at the table and there's conversation and you know how they are. Carla was coming down the Spanish Steps in Rome and went, "What is that smell?" First burger joint. And
first McDonald's.
Well, it wasn't. I don't think it was a McDonald's.
Wasn't it? I thought it was.
It could have been. It could have been, or Burger King or something. But he was just so horrified that fast food should try and interfere in Italian cuisine, because Italian cuisine is quite simple by and large. It's what's available in the local community. So each city has specialities, things that you wouldn't ask for if you were in Piemonte. You wouldn't ask for the cozzi, for the mussels that you would eat in Puglia.
The idea that you'd have the same thing available in every restaurant would just be
anathema. Yeah. So he decided that that's fast food and we don't like it, or it's, you know, there's too many things wrong in that production system. By God, are we seeing it now? I mean, talk about foresight. So he established slow food. And then in 2004, because it was all-encompassing, you know, there were the people who harvest crocus stamens from Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Morocco, very unusual parts of the world where, I'd never met anybody from there. Amazing. So when you go to their, every other year, they have this massive food festival in Turin called Saloni del Gusto, the Houses of Taste or the Rooms of Taste. And you just meet people from all over the planet who are just like you, and instead of being a bit of a weirdo, stranger in a strange land,
you have your tribe.
Yeah, I found my tribe. Yeah. And instead of fighting the current all the time, I found that there are other fishes that swim in the same current as myself. They don't live here necessarily, but we all know the same pressures. So these Kamchatkans, when the interpreter, thank God there was an interpreter, said to them, this is Sally. She's from the Irish Wild Atlantic Smoked Salmon Presidium. I was so proud of us having the first Irish Presidium. I'll explain that in a minute. They went, and I could see their faces falling. I think, oh God, I've gone to the wrong table now. And they said that they got very agitated and asked through the interpreter, "Did your fish run late this year?" This is in 2004. That's 20 years ago. and my blood stopped running in my veins. Yeah, our fish ran late. Climate change. It manifests in the ocean fast, but we're not aware of it on the land.
They were seeing it as well.
Yeah, because we have so little contact with the ocean. We really do. We have so little contact. We've no idea what's in there. Yeah. We fish out we exterminate and annihilate and make extinct populations of fish before we've understood their morphology, what age are they when they breed.
Yeah.
They were doing a lot of research on a deep water species called an orange roughy. There were a lot of them around New Zealand, and they were the first to start having a look at those fish. Well, how long do they live? Well, I don't know. I got one yesterday. It was 120 years old. And I think, shit, sorry. And they're taking them out by the boatful to pump out as cheaper fish. It wasn't the New Zealanders doing it. There were foreign fleets fishing around New Zealand waters. Then they discovered that they think that they're not sexually reproductive till they'll be somewhere between 20 and 40 years of age.
My God.
Yeah. And then you have to go, come on, lads. Gee, because you know nothing about these creatures. Yeah. Let them be. Why are you killing them? Because they're there. I don't get that.
I don't either.
What have we got? Have we got a death wish or something?
I think we possibly do. I think you're right. I suppose when salmon farming was introduced into Ireland, like on the face of it, you'd think, you know, that's not a bad idea. It's out in open water. You know, it's a reliable source of, you know, protein when everyone tells us we should be eating more oily fish and so on. But I think increasingly in the last couple of years, people have been very, very conscious of the damage that it's doing. You're at the coalface of that because you're working with the wild equivalent of that, the properly wild only.
I'm working with the salmon.
With the salmon.
The salmo salar. Yeah. I have asked if we could please change the nomenclature of the thing in a cage, which doesn't fulfill any of the criteria that magnificent creature in, you know, thousands of kilometres of a swim without a map.
Yeah.
Crikey. I thought I was bad.
And as you say, can smell
a drop of water.
Droplets of water
15 kilometres out.
A quick one. Now, I know you get asked on almost every podcast these days to hit that follow or subscribe button, but they never really tell you why that's important. Simply put, if you hit the follow button, it helps us to grow the show, get more great guests, and to reach more people just like you. So it's a small gesture from you that means a huge amount to us. Thanks. Now back to the episode. Talk to us about some of the problems of salmon farming, because for people who maybe...
Where would you like me to start?
Start.
Right.
I don't know. Pick a problem.
Right. Pick a problem. Are we going to talk about SKPs? Are we going to talk about chemicals used in the farms?
But just maybe start by explaining what does the salmon farm look like for people who haven't seen them. So we're talking about a big cage out in the ocean.
Big circular cage in the oceans.
Yeah.
And on a very calm day, you can see a trail of oil on the surface of the water emanating from the back of the cages. That's on the surface. There's various ways of feeding them. The feed is the issue for me. I have no problem with aquaculture. I love the filter feeding shellfish. I think they're great. They use mussels in the harbour in the Mersey in Liverpool, one of the most corrupted bodies of water on the planet, again, because they were used as sewers and industrial wastewater. You know, killed, dead. And the dry docks were just fetid. So they took all the rubbish out, you know, the shopping trolleys, the bicycles, the old cars, washing machines that people took to dumping out of sight, out of mind. They put freshwater mussels in there. And within 18 months of putting freshwater mussels into the river, salmon were back.
Wow.
Mother Nature doesn't need an awful lot from us. She just needs us to butt out.
Get out of the way.
Yeah, just stand back and let her deal with it. 18 months isn't a long time. But it just takes one flush of chemical runoff from somewhere and that's everything dead.
So our caged salmon are being fed. Like, is there a problem with what they're being fed?
Mm-hmm. God,
you
Michael,
can be honest.
I
know you
to stick in the fire here, and I haven't spoken about it very publicly because I get told off.
Okay.
Yeah, I certainly feel that I get told off anyway. If it's not actually apparent, it's definitely a feeling that don't ask that one because she'll give out about farmed salmon.
Yeah.
We'll be left,
and we should say, like, it's a huge industry. It's a huge industry that's employing a lot of people, etc.
Is it
massive?
Is it employing a lot of people?
Well,
if you think that, if you take on into account the people that are processing the wild fish that's taken from the wild to make pellets, the conversion rate's very poor. I've seen statements to the effect that, if you feed a farmed salmon a kilo of fish, 1.1 kilos of fish, it puts on a kilo in weight. Well, that's 1.1 kilos of dry material. Mm. That represents 3.5 to 5 kilos of live fish. Mm. And it's what they call forage fish. It's very low down the food chain. It would be anchovies, sprat, and heaven preserve us, krill. Krill is what gives wild salmon its beautiful colour. And, when you work with wild salmon, you notice that no two are the same colour exactly. Yeah. There's variation.
And you did very kindly bring me an absolutely beautiful, genuine wild salmon. And it is a beautiful colour. That's the other thing. Yeah. It's more brown than I expected, actually.
That's the smoking. Yeah. You've got that. So that's the pellicle, which is the antimicrobial aspect of the curing. But if you look down where it's cut, you'll see the pink there.
Yes.
Beautiful. But there's huge variation in colour. And there's the Pacific wild salmon that are almost white. They don't like krill.
Yeah.
So they don't eat it.
So they don't
and they're
they
almost
don't get
white.
A colour.
They're called ghost fish.
So can that colour be influenced then by what you feed them?
Oh, yes. Yes, I did get upset when I saw that they'd got organic certification and a fisheries conference in Galway. Oh, God, I had the size 20 boots on and met this young man who was the salesman for...
We won't mention any
them.
Names. No.
We won't name them, but they're Norwegian. They're the biggest salmon farmers on the planet. They don't have to be in Norway. They're in Ireland. They're in Chile. They're all over the planet. They've brought up hundreds and hundreds of little small individual fish farms over the planet because they've got economies of scale. And it now means that they can send these passenger ferry-sized vessels down to Antarctica to fish for krill 24/7, along with Chileans and Russians and Chinese for pellets for fish farms. And I think to save the embarrassment of going, that's a sanctuary for blue whales. How dare you? I'm speaking on behalf of blue whales today. Okay. Nobody else speaks for them. That's the only thing that they can eat. They can't go off and eat mackerel. They don't have teeth. They've just got curtains of baleen. So krill's what they feed on. This massive mouth. And anyway, fabulous creatures.
So sorry. Just to be clear, what you're saying there is,
I think it's wicked.
We're overfishing krill, which is the only source of food for
the blue whale.
Whales.
And the blue whale population
to feed
caged fish.
So then, when you put a whole load of salmon into a cage, presumably you get problems with disease.
And new diseases.
I've heard about, and I'm sure lots of people have seen photos of lice on so on.
Yeah.
And then they have to use
there's a big problem.
Medicine to fix that?
Some. Yeah.
Pesticides?
Pesticides, yeah. There's other ways of treating it. They also get these new diseases, Michael. There's a disease called amoebic gill disease. And it's an amoeba. It's a single cell. It goes into the gills of the fish. And that's how they breathe. They get oxygen in their gills. That's how they get oxygen into their bodies. This amoeba gets into the gill, which is kind of feathery. It's like the baleen and the whale. It's kind of similar material. They get stuck, and the fish exude mucus to stop the irritation. They're irritating these amoeba. And if there's a heavy enough infection, it suffocates the salmon. That actually suffocates them because they can't get oxygen anymore. So the way for treating that is to immerse them from their saltwater sea cages into freshwater in what they call tank boats. These are sort of well boats. Freshwater is extracted. We'll go no further on that one. Well, freshwater is extracted from lakes which may be used as human reservoirs for human drinking water. I've said it now. And motored off out to close alongside the cages. And the infected fish are dropped into those freshwater pools in the boats for about an hour to 3 hours, depending on how badly they're affected. And that kills the amoeba.
Right.
And then the fish are put back into salt water. I don't know how they tolerate that, but they must do. They must lose some of them. What happens to the water out the well boat, Michael? I have too many questions. Do they just pull the plug on it and run that, which has been used to treat this massive infection? There must be black cells of amoeba, that tolerate the water. And then you've just released that back into the wild water around the cages. Yeah.
You then mentioned escapees. So like you've got all these salmon, they can leap over the cage.
No, they get out. Seals love salmon. I know this. I've watched seals following salmon boats for years. Bastards. They're so intelligent. Dogs have got nothing on a seal. Seals hear when the boats were fishing at sea, they'd hear the prop noise and they'd know what the boat was going out to do. And if they knew you were a salmon boat, they'd be right behind you and they'd work the net whilst it's in the water. They love salmon. They punch holes in the cage walls. Okay, a lot of them now are double walls with a gap between them because they got sharp teeth, seals. So if a seal makes a hole in the cage, which it can do, it's only going to eat the liver in the fish. It's incredibly wasteful, but the liver's the most nutritious bit for them. Then everybody else can get out.
And part of me thinks, isn't that a lovely, like, escapee, Free Willy style? But actually...
no, you're not one of them. The worry... mink out of mink farms.
No, I'm not one of them,
yes, thank you.
But what I'm saying is problem here is that they're potentially infected with lice that affect the wild population.
Also, their genetics are very different. Okay. They're not acclimatized to... all farmed salmon originally came from rivers in Norway about 45 or 50 years ago. And like I was saying about the ranching, you got a huge pot that you put eggs and milk into, give it an old stir. So you might have adult fish from 20 different rivers in Norway providing the eggs and the milk. So it took them a long time to be able to develop a fish that would sit in a cage and eat despite fluctuating temperatures. They're quite temperature sensitive. If it's really warm, they don't feel like eating, a bit like us. Hot summer's day, you don't feel like steak and chips. The salmon are the same, but they pump the same amount of food into the cage all the time in case they're hungry. Then you've got that falling as detritus to the seabed. Pink cod were quite spectacular in Norway for a long time. And the boats couldn't sell cod with pink flesh because they were hanging around under the cages eating fish feet meal that hadn't been consumed in the cages. So the cod come up pink. No, that's not going to work. You're not going to sell them in a hurry.
Unless you're P.T. Barnum.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. So, so you've got the problem.
They also tried to go back to the farm. I mean, they've tried manipulating them. If they get out of the cages, many years ago when they were still developing them, they discovered that the male fish would eat away fine and they'd get big and heavy and not really mind being stuck in a cage. The female fish, the hen fish, would get to kind of reproductive size at 5 to 6 pounds in weight and start to develop the eggs. And then they couldn't get out to do what nature was telling them to do. Instinctively, they need to go and find the fresh water. So they would stop feeding because they weren't happy. These are depressed female salmon. Gosh, you see, I do feel like a fish. they would then reabsorb the eggs back into the body and get a bit bigger. But then they thought, the scientists or the developers of the pellet thought, why don't we put male hormone in? And then most of the fish will be male and they'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Wow. That's not good.
And then the detritus that the cod weren't eating lands on the seabed, hits the benthic layer, and it's full of fish feces. It's super nutrient rich because it's food for fish and other things. So you get eutrophication. There's no oxygen in the water column. There's no oxygen in the column above there. Yeah. And for a long time, humans thought that the ocean circulation was on the horizontal.
It's vertical.
Now we understand that it's vertical.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
so now you have to pump oxygen in maybe into the column, do you? Something like that? I don't know. Talk to me about the word organic.
Oh, God.
No.
Yes, of course.
Well, I mean, this is a critical one because you see it in smoked salmon in the supermarket, organic. To me, that word sounds wild.
83% of the public think that's wild.
But
it's farmed.
It means farmed. It's been fed organic food, presumably.
Percentage of the feed is organic. Yes, corn.
Famously, salmon
love corn. Yeah, past the sweet corn. They're fed that and then the fish meal, but they are permitted to use dye. And I accosted this poor young man that worked for this salmon company at the Fisheries Conference in Galway, and I said, how are you getting away with that? I said, that's outrageous. You've got dye in the fish. I'm a person who likes organic food, but it's vegetables. I eat wild fish all the time. How did you get certification when you put colouring in it? And he said, it's a nature equivalent dye. And I'm supposed to go, that's fine then. Sorry, no. Because as somebody who consumes as much organic material as I can possibly get my hands on, I have a perception of what that means to my mind.
Yeah.
i.e., there's no artificial anything in it.
Yeah.
Artificial dye. It doesn't matter if it's nature equivalent. It's artificial. It's not natural.
Yeah.
And we're back to the krill. It's krill.
Yeah.
There's National Organic Awards in Ireland, which is great. And as somebody who consumes organic food,
it's to be celebrated, right?
It's absolutely to be celebrated. Yeah. It's what keeps humans healthy.
Yeah.
Is having food that's got all the nutrients that plants used to have before we started feeding plants with chemicals. Not allowed to put my wild fish into National Organic Awards because
not certified.
The feed's not certified. The fish know what they want to eat, but
you're not feeding them.
I'm not feeding them. They're doing it themselves. They're real free-ranging, free-swimming creatures. The fish in cages, however, their food is recognised as being organic by organic certification bodies. So those fish are deemed to be organic. But too many people think that's wild. It is not wild. It's got additives and chemicals in it that you don't want to know.
Yeah.
And that really
as you
upsets
say,
me.
that, and it should do. And I mean, as you say, 85% of people think organic means wild. That's a serious, that's a serious problem for you. But it's also a serious problem for the organic standards for everything, as you say, for meat, for vegetables.
Absolutely. Anything that's terrestrial, then you have to question it when you know that that farmed fish, which is not natural, really. They should be called Salmo domesticus. That's what I'd like to see on those. We have to put the name in Latin. Yeah,
as opposed
Salmo
to
salar, because
which is
that's
wild.
The wild, free-ranging beast, a bit like myself. The one in the cage is kind of slobby and slabby. They used to tow cages up and down the fields in Norway to try and put a bit of muscle on them, make them work.
So it's interesting you say that, because there was a Netflix documentary that I saw a couple of months ago called "You Are What You Eat," and it's a study of twins, and they gave them a vegan diet and so on. So we won't get into all that, but there was a big section, I don't know if you saw it, about salmon, where they actually analysed, because the big thing about oily fish for our health is the omega content.
3, 6 and 9.
3, 6 and 9. And because the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in the farm salmon was totally different. So I was watching this going, wait a minute, the thing I'm eating, which I think is great because it's like they say you should have oily fish in your diet, might actually be bad for your health if it's. Now I know the salmon industry came out and said this was all rubbish and whatever, but like it makes you think, with all produce it's the same problem.
Question
how it's grown, how it's reared is the whole ball game.
Question.
Yeah.
God be with the days when we knew exactly what we were putting on our plates because our neighbours were growing it.
Yeah.
We were sourcing it locally within our local community. Yeah. Now we're sourcing stuff from the other side of the planet. We've no idea what they're up to with it. Yeah. Do you know? It's going to have to... anyway, we won't go there.
But
you're right.
A very kind of, to me, a very depressing side of this is for somebody like me, right, who wants to bring, and there's lots of people like me out there, I think you want to bring oily fish into your diet.
Absolutely.
What can we do? Because like the wild salmon, the stocks are dwindling to almost nothing.
Yeah.
So we've got a sort of a circular problem here where like...
We've got a whole series of things we need to address.
Well, what do I do? What should I eat?
Really low down the food chain. If you can get sprats, eat them.
Okay.
If you can get fresh mackerel, eat them. These are all the oily fish which have got the correct proportions of omega-3, 6 and 9 in them.
Yeah.
They've also got other materials in them. I was going to say something terrible there, but I won't. I'm trying to be good. Polyunsaturated fatty acids is what you want in your body, and you get that in wild fish.
Yeah.
Farmed fish don't. They have saturated fats. It's completely different.
Yeah.
Food production systems with the Open University as well was very good mental massage when I'd been smoking fish for 10 years and I had a bit of time. Girls had gone to secondary school and the brain was just atrophying. So I thought I need to go and give it a wee bit of massage and did food production systems. So I learned about bacteria, growth rate of bacteria, what we need as food in our bodies. And then, I knew I didn't want to put chemicals in my children's bodies. I don't think any parent wants to put anything into their children that's potentially going to do them any harm.
Yeah.
Maybe not today, but maybe 50 years down the line, we cannot know.
Yeah.
No, I just think it shouldn't be called a salmon. It needs another name. Domestic fish would be all right.
That's going to be quite the battle.
No, the organisation that I probably need to contact is an EU organisation which is in charge of the nomenclature in Latin.
Yeah.
And the acronym for that organisation, are we sitting comfortably?
Yeah.
Is WORMS.
No, that's
worms.
Not great.
God, I keep my sense of humour about me. You have to.
Anyway, you would have to, because otherwise it's so depressing.
And marine protected areas. If we had marine protected areas, which we were promised at a conference in Cork last June, the minister came and said, by the end of 2023, Ireland will have its first marine protected area. Yay! No, still nothing. They've done this in New Zealand, and it's been absolutely phenomenal what happens when you say, right, no trawling, first off. You can allow passive fishing in those areas, and that makes it a bit easier for local communities to accept that there'll be no fishing in that area.
Yeah.
But if you're potting, you're not damaging the benthic layer, you're not touching the seabed. You can allow limited inshore fishing, which might be the godsend for the future of inshore fishing.
Yeah.
Because there'll come a point in time when there is not enough fish to fill these super trawler things that are bigger than car ferries, small liners really, and they're processing everything on board. They're hoovering up fish all over the planet. So all fish stocks are collapsing. So when it's no longer economically viable for those big boats, then people in coastal communities will be going, we used to get fish ourselves here. Yeah. Once you leave Mother Nature alone, as I said, give her 18 months and she'll readjust it. Humans have knocked everything out of equilibrium on this planet.
Through greed and...
Greed and... colonialism and anyway. Keep it positive, Barnes.
Well, I was gonna say let's maybe try and finish on something positive.
Yeah.
So we have there's a thing happening in Waterford, which I won't get into the details of, a thing called the Bioregional Weaving Lab, and they're trying to bring together small producers and farmers, and we set about a wonderful lady called Sarah Prosser here locally in Waterford, and we set about sort of writing a vision statement or a manifesto for this group. And one of the men came up with a line, a guy called Ray who lives out in Crook, not too far from here. His line, everyone got to add a line to this manifesto. Brilliant. And then we kind of wove it all together. And his line was, I want my grandchildren to be able to taste the taste of wild salmon.
Thank you.
Do you have hope that that's something that will happen?
Yeah, I do, actually. I think, when the money stops flowing from the European Union for pesticide, fungicide, herbicide, artificial fertilizers, when that money stops coming, when big farming interests realize that actually we've destroyed the soil, what's it they say now? We've got another 8 years of terrestrial growth because we've so damaged the soil microbes, because we didn't understand how vital they are for accessing nutrients from the soil. We've depleted the soils of the major nutrients. We're not paying attention to the fact that micronutrients that are only used in minerals, that are only used in tiny quantities, are vital for healthy foodstuffs. Cows are developing new illnesses and diseases because there might be cobalt missing in your fields.
Yeah.
And that's not being replaced.
It's so delicate, isn't it? The whole thing.
It's such a beautiful balance. But, the Korean farming methods that Doreena's been working on, that Madeleine McKeever's been working on that as well. And the carbon... I've got my bokashi composting bins in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I haven't quite got them under control yet, but that'll come.
It'll come.
And that whole concept, absolutely adore it. The seaweed, I used to take seaweed from the beach because it's absolutely perfect. It's got everything in it. It's got every mineral on the planet in it. It melts in really quickly. There's too much effing plastic in it. Sorry, but, I'm not going to stand on the beach picking the plastic out to bring the seaweed home.
Yeah.
We're bad. But there is hope. And more and more young people, they're our hope. I've taken quite a few students from various gastronomy universities, but specifically Slow Foods University of Gastronomy in Turin. And they're master's students, they're in their 20s. And, I've been saying to them latterly, I said, you must be pretty worried about the way of the world. Yeah. They are. They've got energy. They're aware. And I apologise to them now. I said, we didn't know what the hell was going on. All these terrible things that have been done to the planet were done on the watch of people my generation. Yeah. And I'm deeply sorry, but we didn't know what they were up to. But we can help because we see solution. We've seen the problem and we know you're going to be the ones left to address it. Yeah. So some of us are old wise bags. Ask. I haven't got the energy to go marching these days.
I'm not sure about that. I think you've got plenty.
Marching? No.
Can you, what would you say to someone who's listening to this who likes a sliced smoked salmon under their poached egg in the morning? And I'm including myself in this, who maybe can't get access to wild salmon, buys the smoked salmon they'll get in any supermarket. What would you say to them to do instead?
Try and find a herring. Eat a herring. Eat a good kipper. Eat a wild fish. But, the jury is very much still out on the fishing cages. And they're massively powerful lobbies. They have plenty of money. They've got people in the right places.
They must love
We need to protect the former commercial inshore fishermen. They're part of our Irish community. Yeah. They're part of our culture and heritage. And we're losing them right, left and centre. I don't think I know any fisherman, certainly not down my way, under the age of 40.
Yeah.
You couldn't afford to get into it. We need to be building up our inshore communities again.
Yeah.
Keeping young people, not have villages of Airbnbs, which is
what's happening. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's very temporary employment for people. You want something that's going to give people something to do and find in January through till May when the tourists appear.
I looked as we could go.
We won't.
We could have an old other day's conversation about villages like Dunmaurice where local people can't afford to buy homes because they're all on Airbnb.
It's the same everywhere.
But we won't go there.
No, we won't go there.
The final question, Sally, I want to ask you. We've a closing kind of tradition on the podcast. We ask people, why does food matter to you?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Well, if I want the body to function properly, I have to be putting the right fuel in it. I used to go into schools and say that to transition year kids. If you're not, it's like a car. If you're putting watery fuel in your car, it's not going to go for you. It's not going to run and work properly. And I'm looking at, I've been very lucky. My mother cooked 3-course dinners for us when we were children every evening. Mm-hmm. I was very lucky. So I've cooked all my life. My children have cooked all their lives. They know, they're connected to where their food comes from. And I think it's really sad. And I feel very privileged that I've been able to live that life where I know what my food looked like before it came out off of the supermarket shelf. Yeah. I just feel I'm very lucky. Yeah. And I think that we need to get back to teaching kids in schools, which is happening. And it's maybe going to happen a lot faster. What you're doing here is spectacular, and we all want to be involved in it. I'd love to come up and talk to kids.
Oh, we'd love that. And you've an open invitation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Sally, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. It's been such a privilege to have you here. Keep up the good fight. I have to laugh at you saying I don't have the energy anymore. Will you go away out of that?
And it's not Coca-Cola fueled. This is proper food fueled.
Amazing. Thanks a million.
My joy and pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Food Matters. But we would love you to get more connected to the GIY universe. So we believe that our food system is having a catastrophic impact on people's health and the health of our planet. And we think a movement of people growing some of their own food is the way to fix it. You can stay connected to GIY by signing up to our free newsletter and check out our full range of events, campaigns, resources and courses at giy.ie. Check out the show notes for more information. Thanks for listening and see you soon.